Room 302. Jack Mitchell was exhausted. After driving for 8 hours straight through a torrential downpour, all he wanted was a warm bed and a few hours of sleep. The roadside motel he found seemed perfect. A flickering neon sign reading vacancy beckoned him. He stumbled inside, dripping wet, and the disinterested clerk handed him the key to room 302. "Is it quiet?" Jack asked, barely lifting his eyes. "Quiet enough," the clerk responded, not meeting Jack's gaze. There was something odd about his tone, but Jack was too tired to care. The room was on the 3rd floor, at the end of a dimly lit hallway. The carpet, once vibrant red, was now a faded, stained maroon, and the walls were lined with peeling wallpaper that might have once been white. Jack unlocked the door and stepped inside. The room was small and musty, but it was warm. The only light came from a single lamp on the nightstand, casting eerie shadows across the room. Jack noticed the room number etched into the wood of the doorframe, 302. He dropped his bag, kicked off his shoes, and collapsed onto the bed. As he lay there, he noticed a chill in the air that hadn't been there a moment ago. The heater in the corner whirred softly, but the cold persisted. Jack shivered and pulled the blankets tighter around him, trying to ignore the creeping sense of unease. His eyes began to drift shut when he heard it, a faint whispering, like the rustle of leaves in a breeze. He sat up, heart pounding, straining to hear more. Nothing. Silence. Jack shook his head, telling himself he was just overtired. He lay back down, but sleep wouldn't come. He felt as if he were being watched. The shadows seemed to dance around him, growing longer and darker. Then he saw it. In the corner of the room, where the light didn't quite reach, a figure stood, barely more than a silhouette. Jack's breath caught in his throat. The figure didn't move, but Jack could feel its eyes on him, cold and piercing. "Who's there?" He managed to croak, but the figure remained silent. Summoning his courage, Jack reached over and flicked on the overhead light. The figure vanished, leaving only the empty corner in its place. Jack rubbed his eyes, convinced he was seeing things. Maybe he was more exhausted than he realized. But the feeling of being watched didn't leave. It pressed down on him, heavy and suffocating. He got up and checked the door. It was locked. The window, too, was secure. He was alone, or so he thought. The whispering started again, louder this time, filling the room with an unintelligible murmur. Jack spun around, trying to find the source, but there was nothing. Just the shadows. And then the whispers turned to screams. Jack clapped his hands over his ears, but the noise seemed to come from inside his own head. He stumbled back, tripping over his bag and falling to the floor. The room was spinning, the shadows closing in. Suddenly, the door flew open, and the night clerk stood there, his face pale. "You need to leave," he said urgently. Jack scrambled to his feet, desperate to escape. He grabbed his bag and fled down the hallway, the screams echoing in his ears. He didn't stop until he was in his car, engine running, ready to get as far away as possible. As he sped away from the motel, he glanced in the rearview mirror. For a brief moment, he saw the figure from room 302 standing in the road, watching him leave. Jack's heart raced, but he didn't slow down. The next morning, the clerk found room 302 empty, save for the faint whispers that never truly left. The room was always quiet enough, until it wasn't. And it always watched, waiting for the next weary traveler to rest within its walls. Subscribe for more thrilling horror stories.